You know what, guys? I'm sorry. I can't do this today. I can't do this today. I'm phoning it in. Calling a friend. What? Where are you? It's me, Mr. Mystics. Just do the video for me. Can you do that? Oh, can do. What is up, my fellow squanchers, and welcome to the Sandbox. The newest season of Rick and Morty is officially complete, meaning that it is time to rank every episode from the worst to the best. I think overall this season was a great addition for the series, and I'm certainly looking forward to the next one. But before we get started, you know what to do. Drop your ranking down in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe if you want to, and please somebody share with me the recipe for concentrated dark matter. I'm just asking for a friend. Starting things off at the bottom with number 10, I have episode 3, Bethic Twinstinct. Now, although this one is at the bottom, I don't necessarily think it's a bad episode. It certainly falls in line with a lot of what makes Rick and Morty, Rick and Morty. However, it also leans into the parts of the show that I just don't enjoy compared to others. That being the overly raunchy, incest-related parts of the show. Now, there are some great quips in here. I think Jerry was hysterical, and watching Morty and Summer bond over their escapism into realistic video games away from their mother's affair and their father's cluelessness was a real hoot. I also think that character arc-wise, this was a needed episode for Beth and Clone Beth's characters, even though I'm not a fan of the direction that they chose to go with it. There have been like a dozen other incest-related episodes within the show, and it's just getting to that point where I feel like the showrunners have this odd obsession for the topic. Maybe they're trying to tell us something, I don't know. But within this episode, they try really hard to turn the topic into a dramatic, serious, almost philosophical conversation, and it really just comes off as an awkward and cringy dialogue for me. Moving on to number 9, I have episode 9, A Rick and King Mortar's Mort. Another episode showcasing Morty's progression to be more individualistic, confrontational, and heck, more like Rick. This one felt off the whole time through for me, as Morty just didn't really feel like Morty. I get that the show was trying to tell us that Morty still doesn't trust Rick, and perhaps it's trying to build off of episodes revolving around the relationship, like the Vat of Acid episode. I mean, this one certainly had a few callbacks to it. Or perhaps it's just trying to set up the big reveal in the finale, but for me, it just didn't land as well as it could have. I enjoyed some of the Game of Thrones Night's Watch references, and the premise of Morty not wanting to slice off his junk is certainly an understandable one and makes for some hilarious situations. But I guess at the end of the day, I just didn't jive with the overall direction for this episode's story. Coming in at number 8 is the season finale, Rictional Mortpoon's Rickmas Mortcation. This episode certainly had a few ways it could have gone, and so classic Rick and Morty chose none of them and gave us a completely random yet simple story for this season's finale. Now, I've generally been very positive on Rick and Morty finales. Even back in season 3 when we heard their goals for 14 episodes was scaled back down to the typical 10 and ended with Rick versus the President, I was able to enjoy it and look forward to the seasons to come. But now that the writers have had time to play catch-up, they've gotten their 70-episode deal with Adult Swim, and they've now doubled the amount of seasons since that season 3 finale, the time for excuses is over. This season has been fairly canonical and serialized with its continual progression for all its characters, Evil Morty being dealt with and the rift being patched up, and now Rick Prime making his appearance and giving our Rick another head to hunt. But with its continual teasing, this episode at the end of the day just felt like a blue-balling, knee-slapping commentary on the Star Wars fandom. It just felt out of place and, quite frankly, didn't meet my expectations. It's still filled with some hilarious moments. I mean, for me personally, the President calling out a 14-year-old boy on live national TV, that's just hysterical.
People of Earth.
That's never good.
I'm not here to play the blame game, but Morty Smith got a lightsaber for Christmas, dropped it, and it's now heading for the Earth's core again.
But at the end of the day, I feel like this episode just could have been so much more. Which brings us to number 7, episode 2, Rick a Mort Well Lived. I definitely enjoyed this episode, from the humor of Rick having to gather all of the clueless Mortys across a simulated world, to Summer doing a Die Hard and being the badass that we all know she is.
Die hard, die hard, die hard!
There's some great symbolism going on within this episode, some great quips, and Peter Dinklage guest starring is always a plus. But part of me has to wonder, given how ballsy Morty gets this season, was that part of Morty that was left within the game the part that was holding him back? Was it tied to his infamous nervousness or indecisiveness? He's definitely been growing into his skin since all the way back in season 3, but was this the last and final piece that needed to be cleansed out? Time will only tell. But taking my number 6 spot is episode 7, Full Meta Jack Rick. I think all the episodes from here on out are great additions to the show. This one is season 6 meta-bending anthology type episode, following ones like Interdimensional Cable, Morty's Mind Blowers, and Never Ricking Morty. In fact, this one builds off of Never Ricking Morty with the return of Storylord. And honestly, at the end of the day, this one was a very fun episode. I love it when Rick breaks the fourth wall, and this one just completely shatters it entirely while giving us some zany new characters like previous Leon, the self-referential Six, and of course, the super original Jesus.
I'm here, Leon.
Okay, he apparently prays very well.
Time for you two to meet the Lord.
That's okay, we're good. Treat it like a bear attack. Just walk backwards and make yourself look big.
And again, the humor really landed for me for the most part. I especially enjoyed the parts with the writer, especially that ending.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's like a magic pencil that writes the writer's life. Holy shit, it's a movie about a writer! I am back!
There were some really creative ideas put forth here, but I think the lack of progression or any character arcs for Rick or Morty is what keeps it back from the heavier hitters this season. And so kicking off my top 5 is episode 6, Jurassic Mort. Now, I've seen the fandom quite split on this one. Some people are saying it's one of the worst episodes they've ever seen, and some are hailing it as one of the best, and as always, I'm a lot more in between. I love it when Rick and Morty is able to get philosophical and kick off great conversations while having fun with it, and I love it when our characters are plunged into sci-fi action adventures. But I especially love it when Rick and Morty is able to do both. However, Jurassic Mort does not do both. It really just gives us a witty premise of dinosaurs returning and being like, hey, what the heck happened here? What did you do to our paradise? It's a funny idea, but brilliant? Not really. There is a great character arc for Rick with him being outclassed by the dinos and regressing back into his very petty self. However, in the end, they were able to motivate him to fix portal travel, if for any reason just to prove that he still got it. I think the funniest parts of this episode for me definitely had to do with Jerry, who really had a hell of a season when you think about it. Seeing the family be drawn to him and seek out his advice on how to live in the current state of the world, where nobody has purpose, was just outright hysterical.
Jerry, how do you do it?
Yeah, Dad, how do you do it?
How do you do it, Dad?
Huh?
How do you do it?
How do you do it?
It's finally happened.
All right.
This episode was a hit or miss for me in a lot of ways. For one, I hate the way that they dealt with the rift in space, giving us one of many meta jokes from the writers about the canonical circumstances that are currently in play. But I think the humor present within this episode and the dialogue it started within the fandom earns it the number 5 spot, at least for now. But coming in at number 4 is episode 4, Night Family. On initial watch, I thought this was going to be the season at its best, but because it does sort of rely on the horror aspects and the mystery, it loses some of its rewatchability. It's just hard to be shocked by the same thing twice. However, that said, this is a fantastic episode that pays homage to Jordan Peele's style of horror, Summer being the leader of the Night Family and seeing how much that bugs are awake Rick is great, and Jerry using his as a pen pal is completely in character and completely stupid. Rick is still showing a lot of signs of his pettiness, especially given this episode's ending, but it does help set up his character nicely for the rest of the season as we see he is trying to get closer with his family. Overall, a great episode filled with shocking moments, funny situations, and character-building themes. But moving on to my top 3, I have episode 1, Solar Ricks. This one is neck and neck with my number 2, but after the finale, I could not in good conscience bump this up to number 2 as it starts the tease of Prime Rick, making him out to be this important figure for the season, only for the rug to be pulled out from beneath us. That said, I absolutely love the idea of sending our Rick and Morty and Jerry to their original timelines, and even better, showing us how important it is for Rick to be reunited with his family despite years of saying how replaceable they all are given the greater multiverse. It shows how far Rick has come and serves as a great promise for further development within the season ahead. This season premiere definitely requires viewers to be caught up and in the know, which is another promise of how canonical or serialized this season will be. And the season really was that. Clone Beth becomes a bigger character, Jerry gets a ton more development, Rick and Morty's relationship is challenged and tested, and Rick grows more than he has ever before, especially considering that he actually accepts the usefulness of therapy.
Okay, good talk.
Well, what you're describing is therapy, and if you'd like to keep receiving it, start scheduling your visits with Judy up front.
In a lot of ways, this one feels like the capstone ending to Phase 2 of Rick and Morty, much like how Season 3 felt like the end to Phase 1. But speaking of Rick's development, let's move on to my number 2, which I think is the greatest example of this, Episode 8, Analyze Piss. This was a great, self-contained story that comes with bigger implications for our characters, primarily Rick and Jerry, and as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the Rick and Jerry episodes. They're probably my favorite in all honesty. I feel like this was the writer's attempts at another episode at the level of the Vat of Acid episode or Pickle Rick, where we really dive deeper into Rick's methodology and see what makes him tick. And while it wasn't the most extravagant episode, nor the most comforting,
The hell?
How about a little piss?
it did come with a certain catharsis for Rick's toxicity, with him and Jerry seemingly switching places. Jerry takes down a wacky Rick villain, basks in the fame and validation, all for it to come crumbling down as Rick merely watches and tries to right his wrongs. This of course leads to Jerry becoming the petty one as Rick actually starts to heal. And in the end, Rick is rewarded for it, being praised by his family for his progression. I just like the message that this episode gives, and that sometimes problems are worth ignoring if they're only going to fester and corrupt us when we give them any attention. It's not good to ignore problems, but ignoring ones that we create ourselves and stopping that habit is always healthy. But taking my number 1 has gotta be none other than Episode 5, Final Desmithation. If there are any episodes within Season 6 that could fit within Rick and Morty's golden age, which I believe to be Season 2, this is the one. A seemingly simple and rather crude premise of Jerry being at a risk of doing it with his mother turned into a mass conspiracy behind fortune cookie fortunes. This is where I think the show shines. I think this is probably the funniest episode within the season for me, and it's a great example of Rick's progression as well, with him choosing Jerry over himself in the end.
You saved me.
It is another incest-related episode, but hey, at least this time they're trying to prevent it. This episode just really feels like classic Rick and Morty, despite the showrunners claiming that they don't know what that means.
Do some classic adventures, like Season 1.
I'm so sick of that note. What the does it even mean?
Rick is burping mid-sentence again, there's a relaxed form of storytelling that leans into the wacky and zany, there's pop culture references, and family dynamics are at the heart of the episode. I just love this one so much. But that's just my list, and I would love to see yours down in the comments below. I'll also be putting out my season ranking up on TikTok, so you guys can follow me there using the handle in the description, and you're more than free to share your season ranking down in the comments as well. In celebration of the holiday season, I'll be putting out a video essay on a certain Bob's Burgers Christmas episode within the coming days, so be on the lookout for that. But as for now, that's it from me. I'm going to wish you guys all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Happy holidays, everyone. I will see you all next time.